Hi, this is Stan.
Hi, Stan. This is Ginger with the Overdrive Show. How are you today?
Fine, fine. And yeah, so we were trying to work this out last Thursday, weren't we?
Yeah, and I think you were in the middle of coming or going or something. I
Yeah.
can't.
Well, we did. Well, I think you were tied up early in the morning, which I had open, and then as the morning kind of got later, my wife and I headed up to New York for some business and a wedding. So anyway, so I was out the rest of that day and the whole next day. So thanks for making the adjustment.
Oh, no problem. I do them all week, so I really kind of just work around everyone else's schedules most of the time as much as I
Yeah.
can. Um,
So now, were you there at the Christy Awards?
no, I certainly
Oh,
wish I
okay.
would have been, but
Well, next year we have to get you there. I think you'd enjoy it.
well, I'm actually writing a book right now. I'm a huge. I've written all my life. I'm doing some journalist stuff for Together LA right now. I helped write on a movie this year, so I've been in radio as well as working in Christian artist management. So I've
Right.
kind of like always tiptoed around it, but I've always done it privately. Like I write all the time. So
Yeah.
I'm just now like actually putting my pen to paper and sharing it with other people. So
That's
um,
great.
I mean, so that people know who you are, you're the executive director of the ECPA, which is Evangelical Christian Publishers Association. It's hard to say that all right.
Mm-hmm.
But the Christy Awards was on November the 8th, which was a day shy of the 50th anniversary of the book Christy, right? Um, uh,
Right. Right.
so that's so very cool. So
Yeah.
how did the award show go? Was it amazing?
It was, and it was our first time. I don't know if Lori shared this with you, but this award show had been going for 17 years. So it's actually an awards program where publishers submit fiction in various categories. We have 9 categories. I think, and if you haven't seen it, you probably have the website that shows
Yes.
the
Hmm.
categories. Okay, so you see what those are. I need to go through those. And so at the as it was being formally, it was attached to. I don't know if you know about CBA, the Christian Booksellers Association, and ICRS,
Right.
which is their annual convention. So they had, for the first 17 years, had it in conjunction with the Christian Booksellers Convention, or called ICRS. And so that had dwindled in attendance, and just because retail, has not been the force that it once was in the Christian market. And so last year, 2016, they didn't even have a live awards program. It just was kind of an online thing. So
Right.
kind of toward the end of last year, beginning of this year, we kind of worked out an arrangement with and really it's not owners as much as just the stewards of the Christy Award, to take it over and manage the program and then produce the event. So then we came back and decided to move it to Nashville rather than follow the ICRS show around. And so this was kind of a reboot or a refresh, if you will, of the Christy Award. And yes, it was amazing. It was on the campus of Lipscomb University. And of course, Nashville is publishing central, right?
Yeah.
This is where publishers, not just Christian publishers, but secular publishers as well, have found a home, and it's now the second most influential publishing city in America, right after New York City, and based on the number of books that are produced by companies that are based there. So, and it was great that we were able to also invite many of the finalists. We invited all the finalists. There were 27, so 9 categories, and 3 finalists in each one. And we had more than half the finalists were able to come and be with us for the evening, and we had them, whether or not they won, of course, they didn't know they had won, but we had them act as the presenters. So, like in the Oscars, where you have maybe a former winner or people who have been, nominated that particular night, and they'll do the presentation, for best actress or best actor, whatever. So we did that in each of the 9 categories. It was nice to see the authors up there and be able to announce the finalists and then the eventual winner in each category. And then our speakers, our presenters were Andrew Peterson and Karen Kingsbury, which they just were outstanding. We really were thrilled with their time and talent that they invested with us. And so it was a great evening. And I think especially given the 50th anniversary, as you said, and that was one of the highlights, was to have the daughter-in-law of Catherine Marshall, who wrote the book Christy,
Wow.
published 50 years ago. And her name is Nancy Lesourd, and that's spelled Lesourd. Sorry, you're taping this, aren't you? So
yes, I'm good. Yeah.
So Nancy Lesourd was there as just to kind of honor the legacy of her mother-in-law's book, published 50 years ago. And then at the conclusion of the evening, the publisher for the new Christy 50th anniversary edition announced that they were giving away one copy to each person attending.
Wow.
So everybody walked out with this beautiful 50th anniversary commemorative book, and kind of, honoring the legacy of the book and what it's meant to Christian fiction. Just a fine novel, and has sold more than 10 million copies in the 50 years since it was released. So it's been an inspiration to at least two generations of writers, and I think a new generation will probably also be inspired by it as we go forward.
Yeah, I always hope that something will, catch the newer generation, because I grew up in, an era where maybe you did too, where, TV was, you obviously you had to watch whatever was on, and depending on your taste, there may be very little that you actually care about what's on TV. So like I turned to book as my, that's where most of my adventures, and especially fiction, you travel to other places in your mind, I think that so many kids, we're in a state of where kids watch the movie and then go back and read the book. They watch, Lord of the Rings or something like that, and then they go back or Harry Potter or something, and they go back and read the books. But we're in this very odd. I work with Christian artists as well as authors and film people for interviews, and what's really odd about it is, I interviewed John Schlitt of Petra, who is the lead singer.
Really?
Yeah, I just today, I've interviewed him a million times. He is literally one of my favorite people on the planet. Yeah. He is such an amazing guy. And what's funny is we were talking about how what's funny is there's like only 12 songs that get rotated like all the time on Christian radio now, which back when they were popular in the 80s, there was not hardly anything around, so everything got played. But now there's this plethora of music available, but it's this narrow way of getting on, getting into there. And, back then, books were not as enormous as they are now. We have so much selection, but the bookstores are closing, and obviously a lot of it's online, which sometimes can be easier for people to get their books out. But then the exposure, it's sometimes hit and miss, depending on the campaign people run. You get lucky or unlucky sometimes. And, it's this time where this younger generation, they have an interest in it. And Christian film is, I think, where Christian books are. The interest is there, and people are willing to give it a shot. But, there's things like the Christy Awards, things that encourage people to get, involved in it. And we hold the red carpets in weird places like Michigan, so that, like we can get people, we can let people know that we may not be holding the same content as the secular world, but it doesn't negate how impactful it is, and what is you've been involved since the 90s and in Christian writing period, since the 90s.
My original entry into this whole space was through the Christian bookstore. My family owned a chain of retail Christian bookstores into the 70s and 80s and 90s even. It was a very effective way of reaching people with music and, as you said, and also film. It came through video, but later, through DVDs. So this is where people went. This is pre-Amazon and pre-iPhone,
right?
And it was the gathering place for people. So that's where I, got my background in this, and then
and they didn't even have a coffee house in it, and still it was a gathering place.
Yeah, well, actually, we kind of pioneered that. In the early 90s, we put coffee houses in all of our stores, and it was to try to, part of it is you want to keep people around, and and have them enjoy the atmosphere. And now, of course, it's pretty common
Right.
to have that kind of combination. So, and then we sold our stores in the late 90s, and I started writing and then working in publishing. And so it's been a journey for me of really, to be now a part of this Association of Christian Publishers, ECPA, that really promotes great writing and great books. So we have a kind of a nonfiction side. We have an award program called the Christian Book Award, where we recognize and award the best in nonfiction in about 10 categories. And then this new Christy Award for us. It's the 18th year this year for it, but for us to be in fiction now. And I got to tell you, it was an extraordinary experience, because here's the deal. As you said about music, what John Schlitt said, that, there is more and more being done in music, and the same thing is true with books. More and more books are being written, and yet there are fewer places. There are certainly the physical places have dwindled, and it's kind of hard for people to discover new talent. So we hope that through the Christy Award, we recognize a lot of the talent that some of whom are very well known. And some of the nominees, as you saw in the program, like Beth Moore is very well known, Joel Rosenberg, Terry Blackstock, and others that are, they're pretty popular Christian writers, but there are others that are not well known. And so to have this platform of recognizing the excellence of their writing, I think is a wonderful thing, both for the readers, certainly for the authors, but especially for readers. If we can draw attention to excellence in fiction that's told from a Christian worldview, that's what our objective is.
Which that separates you from secular, because secular awards based on media always has to do with what the popular ideas are, the popular actor, the popular movie. That's what gets the attention, not necessarily. You get the odd indie film that was just stellar that they couldn't ignore, but it's a rare shot that happens, but it's usually the well-known things, well-known actors and well-known films, which that the Christy Awards allows for people who don't have that exposure and distribution to get that recognition, and people can get to know them as an author and get to know the books. And I think this is Christian fiction. A lot of people will now. Beth Moore, she does obviously a lot of great self-teaching. She's a Texas girl like me, so I'm in love with her. But but the fact that people don't understand sometimes Christian fiction and the impact. I've grown up on fiction alone. Period. I mean, I was a Jane Austen addict, and which and that's like hard to digest. You have to read a sentence at a time. I dripped over every word. And with Christian fiction, somebody like you who has had writers, publishers, and a bookstore owner, what is your idea on the impact that Christian fiction can do for the world that people may not realize?
That's a great question, and here's my take on it. I have thought about this. So there's a kind of a trio of things that we as Christians kind of value, and it basically comes from the ancient Greeks, and that's truth, goodness, and beauty. And the Christian message embodies all three of these. We have the truth of the gospel, that we know that there is a God, that He sent His Son Jesus to die so that we might be brought back into a right relationship with God. We know there's goodness, that even though the world sometimes seems broken, I mean, it is broken. We know that from sin. And yet there is goodness that comes through. It's the good things that people do. It's the good that God gives us. His world that He's made still is beautiful, despite, the occasional hurricane and earthquake.
Right.
It's still an amazing place to live. And then the beauty of our world. When you look around at just the beauty of nature, the beauty of how we function, live in this planet that we call home. But then when you start looking at ideas, and I think as Christians, we have, for the last, certainly in my lifetime, we have truth has been kind of our entree for people. We say, here's the truth of the gospel, just believe this and you'll be saved. And absolutely that is true, and is historically been a wonderful way for people to come to God. But anymore, these days, there's so much noise in our culture, so much competition for ideas, and people don't trust the Bible like they once did. They don't value it. They don't hold God in high esteem in general, just the world in general. And here's the thing. I think I'm seeing an era, and I think others have reflected on this as well, where the beauty is going to be the entree to truth. And the beauty that we see, not just in nature, and that is certainly a way to do it, but the beauty in literature, in film, in music. When people hear a great song and they see a movie that moves them, or they read a book that is so well told, and here we're talking about fiction, the beauty of a story and of characters. And of course, beauty doesn't mean that it's a story that's going to be, happy clappy and everybody is great. And there is a difficulty to life in real life, and so I think what good fiction does, it shows that journey of difficulty, and yet there's that hope that is also there. It's a realistic way life works, and when stories are told from that perspective, to offer the fallibility of the human condition and things that happen in broken relationships, and yet there is a redemption that happens at the end of the story that gives us hope that there is something more than what we see here. I think that fiction has a way to do that that's just extraordinary. So our hope is, we present publishers, is to find that kind of that next generation of Christian writers who have the ability to tell great stories. Storytelling, and we see in the Bible is one big story, of course, from Genesis to Revelation, and yet it's a thousand little stories. Someone used the expression during this conference, and I'd never heard it before. It's called flash fiction, and it's where maybe in the Bible there's maybe 2 paragraphs of a story about a character, or sometimes it goes longer, but there's something to learn there about that character, about that story. And Jesus told a lot of flash fiction. They were called parables, right?
Right, exactly.
He told stories about the prodigal son, about the lost coin, or about the good shepherd. I mean, all these different things that he would tell in stories that people related to. It was about characters and ideas and places that were very real in first century Palestine, and Jesus tapped into that. Whether it was coins or sheep or whatever it was, people understood that. And so he was the great storyteller. So we, as if that's a technique he used to show what the kingdom is like and what it's like to be related to God in a meaningful way, let's us in our time use that beauty to be an entrance to the truth, so that people will get then to the truth of the gospel and the truth of who Jesus is. And I'm just thrilled that not only are we recognizing excellence in Christian fiction through the Christy Award, but it's an encouragement to writers who are coming along and those that maybe have yet to be discovered. And to have someone new like Beth Moore come into the genre,
Mm-hmm.
She's been writing Bible studies and teaching for years and years, and I'm a fan just like you.
Right.
But to have her kind of now tell a different kind of an approach to truth through her story, I think it's wonderful. And people that maybe wouldn't pick up a book on apologetics or maybe even crack open a Bible, they may read a book of fiction, about something and be drawn into. And what's really great is that at the end of many of the fiction books that are published from the publishers we represent, there's maybe an afterword, or even I've seen study guides. In fact, our book of the year by Charles Martin, if you go to the back of the book, and I'm referring to the part of the program here, but you go to the back, there's actually a study guide that you can go through, and it talks about the good. The book is called Long Way Gone. It was the Christy Book of the Year. And at the end of the book, there's a study guide, and I've seen that in a couple of different just fiction books I picked up of the winners this year, that this is something that's offered for people. And it's wonderful, but you get there through the beauty of the story.
And for me, like I'm a fan of Christian fiction, but I don't always, I see who gets press releases to me, or what I run across on Amazon. I don't necessarily get to sometimes be exposed to kind of some of the best and people who, they can look through your award winners and find, and that's what because already I've looked through the award winners, I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna like this one. I'm gonna get. I'm gonna try this. Like, I'm
Right.
already looking at those as that way. I think what Christian fiction, has the ability to do is like Christian movies. I think you kind of hit the point on about the beauty aspect because the truth right now, there's none so deaf as those who will not hear. I mean,
Yeah.
right now, no one wants to hear the truth. They don't want to hear about God. They don't want to hear Jesus. They
Right.
don't. I mean, people who are non-believers, I mean, very rarely that turns them off. Their ears just turn off immediately sometimes. But, if you, and honestly, it's not like, even though Jesus normally, he would usually end with, they said, who are you? It was, I am the great I am. He didn't walk around saying, by the way, I'm the son of
Yeah.
God.
Right.
So we make the mistake sometimes in film storytelling or even Christian fiction storytelling or something like that we feel like we have to say the Holy Spirit, Jesus, the Bible, God, like every so many sentences, or even in
Right.
lyrics of songs. But what
Right.
really grabs people is to show them, you were saying it doesn't have to always be happy to be beautiful. Les Miserables was one of the the best stories, like ever told. And I know it's loosely based on real events, but it is a beautiful story, but it's heart wrenching,
Right.
and but it has a beautiful picture of forgiveness and redemption and hope. And
Right.
that's one of those things that I think we have to make sure, the film that I've been working on with my friend Jen Gotson it's a Christmas story, and it's a love story with some, obviously they have some, issues they have to go through, some dramatics, but it's not a heart-wrenching story because it's a Christmas story. So it's a little bit more lighthearted. But one of the things when we sent it to get it analyzed by like a secular, person, group to see what it's like as far as the content, the very first thing they said is one of the things I told her initially, and this first time I've actually been able to actually contribute right on a film is I told them, I said, you've got too much God in there, and I said, and I don't mean content. I mean the words. You got to quit saying it. And she was like, well, I don't. She didn't understand until they responded back and they said, we may not believe your message or we may not agree with it, but if you will just show us and not tell us, like show us in the movie about what you mean by how God forgives or whatever you're trying to get across. Show us, don't tell us. And that became, we stripped it back down and told the story through the way the characters behaved within each other and concentrated on that and making that richer. And that's the beauty of Christian fiction, both in books and film. And I encourage people to get involved in reading that and sharing books. I mean, buy a book for somebody, share it with them, give them a book. I would love to have you share the website for how they can find out who the winners are, so that people can look there at the people who are also nominated, to see who, like a list of the the fiction for people to go, and go read. And sorry, I've been doing interviews all day, so I'm tongue tied. Is there a website still for
Yes,
the nominees?
absolutely, absolutely. And let me say, you are saying it so well, DJ Ginger. I just appreciate your passion for this. I really do. And see, here's the thing: it's people like you who are a voice. You're a voice to people who are listening to you, who are following you, who are reading your blogs and all of that, to be able to talk about these books, because we can only do so much as a publishers association, but you're the ones who will get the word out, and it's your enthusiasm and knowledge of this that is going to spread. So we appreciate that very much. So the website is Christy Awards. .com. So CHRASTY. So Christy is the name of the book. We'll talk about her in a minute. ChristyAwards.com. And you'll find the list of the winners, as well as the people who were at the Christy Award, included Karen Kingsbury, who's a New York Times bestselling author. She was one of our speakers. And then Andrew Peterson, who is both a musician and a writer, and he was an extraordinary presenter. He sang some songs. He called them his bookish songs, so based on Lord of the Rings, and it was really fun. And then our host, our MC, was Chris Fabry, who is, like you, he's a host of a radio program through Moody Radio, and he actually is an author as well, and he won 2 Christy Awards on that night on November 8th, so it's kind of cool. But anyway, so ChristyAwards.com is the site. And let me just go back to something you said, too. You used the word redemption. And, you know, the story of God and humanity is really a 3-act play. And every great book, like Les Miserables, and every great, you know, probably even movie is based on these 3 acts. So here they are, and you'll know this.
Yeah.
First is creation, fall is Act 2, redemption is Act 3. So you've got creation, fall, redemption. It's a story of God and his relationship to us as his created beings. And there's a sadness. And even Christmas, though it's a happy time, but we know that the birth of Christ meant that he came to die. And right. there would be, and even in his birth there was a struggle, because there was a death sentence on every boy 2 years and under. At that time, that was being carried out. And you can only imagine, they call it the slaughter of the innocents, that this is the world that Jesus was born into. And then, of course, after his birth, his parents had to flee to Egypt, to a foreign land, and hide out for a couple of years, you know, right. until it was safe to return. So even the Christmas story is beautiful and as dramatic as it was. There was potential tragedy there. There was for many, many people, of course, because of what happened with Herod's ordering of the 2-year-old boys and under. So, and then, of course, the life of Jesus, it's really that. It's creation, fall, redemption. He didn't fall like we did, but he experienced, you know, on our behalf, the tragedy of what sin has done. And yet the redemption that he brought through his death and resurrection is really our hope. So when we can tell that story and, through our imagination, through the author's imagination, if people relate to it, people relate to this story. It's intrinsic in them. C.S. Lewis called that the true myth, the true Christian myth. Myth just is kind of a way of telling a story. But this is true. This is not made up. And so when we kind of pattern art, whether it's books or music or even, you know, paintings around that story, it does bring truth. And it's an entree to the truth of what God has done through Jesus. So, and I think too, and I know you see this the way I do, but it's the excellence of the work that's going to give it credibility. You know, for right. a long time, Christian fiction has kind of been synonymous with not very good, right? It's just like, okay, it's kind of, we'll excuse it because it's got a nice message, but otherwise it doesn't hold up in the whole kind of scope of what great fiction can be. But I think that's changing. And the book Christy, which, as you said at the top of this interview, 50 years, almost to the day of the Christy Awards this year, was released. And in the first week of its release, it made the top 10 New York Times bestsellers list. This is
which is unheard of.
Yeah, we've all heard of that. But they, of course, don't typically put Christian books on there because, number one, they don't sell like secular books do, but they're just not recognized as being in the same league. But here's this book about this girl from the South that went to Appalachia to teach the poor how to read and brought this redemptive quality in her own life to this story. So, I mean, Catherine Marshall told the story. It went on to, as I said, sell 10 million books over the next 50 years. And I believe it's going to inspire a new generation of writers because it does tell that story in such a vivid way. And the writing was so good.
Yeah.
And it holds up so well 50 years later. So that's kind of why the spirit of the Christy Awards is to recognize excellence in writing as these stories are told about what is really true about God.
And, I tell my kids, I've exposed, my son has actually had to sit through Pride and Prejudice, I mean, he's 23, so you can imagine how every cell in him was like screaming. But, it's funny, actually a girlfriend of his made him sit through it, not me, but he'd already feared it because of mom. But I've exposed them from, everything from, the actual Bible to, Les Miserables or, not just Jane Austen, but because I have my love for film, period, or for books. I've exposed my middle child. She just turned 22 yesterday, and she is a humongous reader. So she's a child after my own heart. And one of the things that I tell them, I'll tell them books that I read when I was younger, or books that have been out, or films that have been out for a very long time, and they're like, yeah, but that's old. And I was like, yeah, but so is the Bible. But these stories are timeless. The book Christy is still something any kid could read today, and if they sat down and read it, would be affected. Because I tell my kids, when they were in teenage and they were misbehaving, I would tell them, you're not going to shock me. You didn't invent sin. It's same stuff, different day, different kid. I mean, everybody has, every story that has, that's been told in Christian fiction could be re-released as a film or anything else, because those basic stories of, like you're saying, whether it's, sometimes I think it's the creation of the character, and the backdrop comes in first, and then of course you have a fall of some kind. There's some dramatic catalyst, that happens to switch it up and flip the script literally, and then you have the redemption. Sometimes not at the end. Sometimes there are endings like that, but usually there's that, whether it's the guy gets the girl at the end, and there's that one kiss and it's over, or it's, somebody who's lost is found, literally or figuratively. But that's correct. I mean, there's all these stories and these books, no matter what age. I wish they would take some of these books that have been classics for a while and make them into children's books, put, that way when they get older, they actually read the older version of the book that's a little more complex for them to read. So I guess when I'm done with my book, I'll send it to you and you can forward it on. If nothing else, maybe you'll read it.
I love it. Well, the fact that you've got such an interest in the creative arts, and you're in media, so that's kind of your world.
Yeah.
But, the fact that, and it's easy, let me tell you this too, sitting down, getting a millennial or a younger, the next generation, I guess is called iGen, or Generation Z, to sit down with the media called the book is sometimes a challenge.
Yeah.
We're so used to it. And this is true of any age. I mean, adults, boomers can be in the same way. If you're used to basically reading on your phone and getting content on your phone or on your screens, to sit down with a book, it takes a little bit of a discipline. But once you are drawn into something, it can become extraordinary and rewarding, because there's something about a book that takes your imagination to places that your screen cannot. And as you just said too, writing is good, and the character development, the plot, and all of that, you get swept away. And let's remember too, most great movies are based on great books. Not all of them, but certainly many of them.
Or they make them into a book after it's made.
Or as you said, they reverse it, and make it into a book. But there's great value, and we seem to learn, and things that we read tend to go deeper into our souls than stuff that we just kind of skate along. Not to say there's not good stuff on obviously there's the value of what is done through technology is pretty amazing. And let's remember too, the printing press at one time was a huge technology change for people. So,
exactly.
It's great that we have the ability to not just to communicate that way, but then you can download a book on your Kindle or other device in a matter of seconds. And as much as I love the good old days of the Christian bookstore, it took a lot of time and effort to go get a book. You had to get in your car and drive there and hope they had it in stock and all of that. And now you can get it instantly if you need to. But we're at ECPA. We're all about helping publishers spread the Christian message in a more effective way, and that's whether it's fiction or nonfiction, that's what we're about. So, but this new kind of, for us, entrance into the world of fiction has been really extraordinary. And I'll say this too: the writers of fiction are much more engaged and just alive. Not that nonfiction writers aren't, but they usually have something they're working on, and it's like it's more of a task, to talk about things in our world, and it's more serious. But with fiction, your imagination takes over, and they're just a great bunch. I just love being around them during this award program we had on last Wednesday night. So they're just enthusiastic, and they have fans that follow them, and so they're out in the social media world talking about their book, and it's just it's great to see, and we're delighted to be now a part of this. And very soon it will have dates for next year, but it'll most certainly be back in Nashville, probably November that first week of November again. So we want to get you there.
I will.
Year, so
absolutely.
Part of it. Yeah, absolutely.
And too. Now you still have conversantlife.com, which you have content, social media,
social
experience.
Media, content site.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
And
exactly. And I also write. I have a writing partner, Bruce Bickle, and so we have our latest series of books is Bethany House Publisher, a great fiction publisher, but they also do nonfiction. And it's answering the toughest questions about suffering and evil is the most recent book that we have. It was just released in September. And we try to approach a topic like suffering and evil from really what are the questions people are asking about it. So we did extensive surveys to find out what young adults in particular are thinking. And we take those questions then and answer them, not in a way that's kind of like, this is what you must believe, but rather here's what, the Bible says, and kind of make your decision, and yet really to show the truth for what it is. But we hopefully in a really an open way to get people to consider what the Christian message says about suffering and evil, as opposed to, kind of writing it off like it's not relevant. And anyway, so that's the latest series of books. That's the third. The other two were on God and the Bible, and then answering the toughest questions about heaven and hell. So people can check that out under my name, Stan Jantz, or just by the title.
And what's great is I think you are approaching it in the way that I think will affect not only the younger generation, but the generation who are the parents who are in that generation where the book loving is starting to wean off, maybe as unfortunately, but is that it is a approach of being more informative than instructive, because I think that is important, because I think people are not afraid for you to inform them facts about our faith. What they don't want is to be instructed that they have to follow it, or this is what you must do and this is what you must not do. It's you're approaching it as this is the information, and then it's up to you, and it really is. It's up to the Holy Spirit for the Holy Spirit to take over once the information is in their grasp. It's between them and the Holy Spirit whether or not they do something with it after that. You can't obviously force them. So, and that Christ never did that. He demonstrated it and told the truth. And
he asked a lot of questions, and I think that's one thing we've missed too, is that we allow people to ask questions, and there hasn't been a place in the church for that. I didn't have growing up. You listen to sermons and go to maybe a class or something, but when do we have a chance to really ask these questions? And these are questions Christians ask too about suffering and evil, and especially with what's been going on the last 2-3 months in our world. And to really know, does God really care that the world is falling apart? At least that's our perception. And what has he done, and how? And maybe there's a personal thing people are going through. Just in my life in the last 3 months, I've had friends who have been diagnosed with cancer, and those that have passed away, and just in a little period of time. But everybody's going through this. We all deal with it, or it could be a broken relationship or financial difficulty. So people are, and always have been, but we struggle and we wonder, does God really care? And sometimes he seems distant. And so, but he invites our questions, he invites our doubts, and he is there to address those, answer those. But we need to give people that space, as you said, to be able to ask those questions without fearing that people think less of me, if I don't have confidence in this, or if I don't have an answer for it. And to be able to give information is you have exactly right, as far as opposed to instruction.
Yeah.
People don't like to be talked down to. They want to be able to have a conversation about these things. And I think that's again, another great thing fiction does. It invites your reflection as opposed to trying to tell you what to do.
Well, it's not threatening that way. When you do it that way,
exactly.
It doesn't. And I think that I'll say for myself, I was in a abusive relationship with a Christian man. I mean, like my marriage was a constant state of abuse. I say constant. It didn't obviously start out that way, but he was serving in the church, and I went to my pastor after several years of it going on, and he would not step in, and he was serving in the church at the time, and he didn't take him out of service even. And I didn't understand it. And I was mad at the church because I had 3 little kids and I'm being abused by my husband, and he's serving in the church worship band, and no one's doing anything about it. And I only told the pastor but see, like I might have been brave enough to go on your website and ask that question, but I wouldn't ask someone in my church. And I think non-Christians are sometimes bolder about asking questions than Christians are. You know what I mean? Like Christians are afraid of judgment from other believers in their church or other believers that they know. They're afraid to ask them because they're afraid that they'll look like less of a Christian or maybe they're not smart or something like that, or just being judged. Like, why are you even asking this? Like, what's going on in your life that you're asking this question? I mean, I think that you giving that platform for people to just ask, I'm going through this either as a Christian or not, or my friend is, can you answer this? And even if they're just pointed in the direction of, people who specialize in these areas, whether it's suicide, suicide's finally being talked about. There's subjects that were so taboo for so long, but the silent suffering, just got bigger because the more you hide it, the larger. Because for me, my husband, because the church didn't do anything about it, it empowered him. He got bolder with his abuse. He got not only bolder in what he did, but how often he did it, because he knew there was no repercussions. And me as a Christian woman did not want to divorce her husband. And for me to leave, I was willing to face God's wrath than my husband's when I left. I had to get to that point, and it shouldn't have been that way. There should have been somebody I could have talked to, and I felt very helpless. And I think this is a great place for people to find out about several different things, but also, a fiction book can do that. If they find out it's a book on, some girl who was trapped in a bad situation like that, or someone who was depressed and went through something and hope came out of it. Even I will tell you myself, and this will probably, you'll just realize exactly where I'm going. I'm writing a fiction and a nonfiction at the same time. And the fiction one, we raise horses down south, and it's like a horse being unbridled and set free out in the pasture. But that's how I am with fiction, because I am writing as a character. I can be bolder and tell a story that's got stronger content that I wouldn't say out loud as a true story, So I think that's a great part about fiction telling,
Well, I really admire that, that's a tough thing. These things in the church unfortunately happen, and we just haven't had good ways to deal with this kind of problem. And I won't go into it, but I've got a brother-in-law whose sister was in the same boat, exactly the same as you, and the church just didn't step up when they should have, and it was very sad. But there is hope, and I love it that you find that expression through fiction. And I think you, of course, as both a reader and a writer, but anybody who is going through this kind of an experience, that's what fiction does. It can tell the story truthfully, even though that sounds kind of odd, because fiction, by its very definition, are stories that are made up.
But every story is never truly made up. There's always an influence. Yeah,
experience, or based on
the mindset
in real life, and so So good fiction tells the truth, and it does it in a way that people will both relate to, but also be inspired by, and hopefully to be better. And that's part of what the book Christy has done to at least two generations, and maybe a third. And that is to make a sacrifice and to work with and help the least of these, and I think the current generation, whether we call them millennials or whatever, have a real interest to help make the world a better place. But you can't do it with that if you leave out. You can certainly do a lot of work that will help, but if you don't bring the truth of what our world really is like, and that there is a God who cares very much about what happens, and with that component, then you bring the whole complete story, and it's not just part of the story. And I think that's what good fiction does, and the book Christy did that too, and it's inspired people not just to write,
but to serve
from authors, but to do something as the character in the book did.
Right.
To go to a place that was really not, where people went, was the backwoods and hollers of the south of Appalachia, and to really make a difference. So that's what we hope will happen for a new generation.
So they can get you on Facebook as well as your website, I'm assuming, for the Conversant Life?
Yeah, or just under my name, Stan Jantz, but Conversant Life as well, both on Facebook. And so, yes, we'd love it. They can start. The actual website is conversantlife.com. And that's just a good, again, a social media kind of content site. But Christy Awards.com is where they can get information, your listeners, about the books that were nominated and also the winners from that. And so, yeah, we're just delighted to be with you. And I just really, you have the soul as well as the talent of a true artist.
Oh, thank you.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. And I can just tell, just talking with you and hearing you express, and I know it's great. So may your audience ever expand.
Well, thank you. And what we will share both of your websites and all of your social media. We'll tag your social media with the interview, as well as share, with people that if they want to check out the Christy Award winners, so they can find some new fan fiction, type, books, that they can find some great Christian fiction books there, as well as, the ability to go to conversantlife.com or find Stan Jantz. It's Jantz, by the way. So if they want to look you up, or any of the other things, we can hook all those together and tag them so people know where to go and find out more information about the Christy Awards, as well as your social media platform. So it was just a great honor talking to you today. Thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure. Let's keep in touch as we go, and God bless you, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving and a blessed Christmas.